Welcome back to Port Elizabeth, the beautiful city. This is part 23, and we resume the walk I did in October 2014 at the Opera House in Whites Road, which was the original bottom section here was built in 1892 and is apparently the oldest still functioning opera house in Africa. So as you go up the road, you get this upper section, which was added, I think, in about the 1950s or so. You can see the roof doesn't line up there, but it is in the same style. So very much just, I think, before you just entered the opera house through these doors, then there was more of a reception area built in this part, and upstairs is a place called the Barn, which is a smaller venue for smaller productions. So that's the main entrance to the opera house. And then the upper thing, apparently this here was a major sort of entrance as well. Quite nice architecture. So that, I think, this might have even been a third extension they did up the hill. You can see the lighthouse in the distance on the Donkin Reserve. And of course, the excavations going on for this new extension, which would be in a very high-tech, modern form. But actually, the contrast works for me. It's so stark that it's actually quite an interesting juxtaposition. So I was able to get inside. They were overhauling this interior. Apparently, there were a few leaks and so forth, but I don't think it was a major one. It says here they're surviving, the only surviving opera house in Africa and the Southern Hemisphere. Victorian opera house. So all the lights were on, and this shows you basically quite a nice intimate venue, really. These little things on the end of each row of seats. And we're in the upstairs gallery, and then to the more recent section, which was more sort of between acts or parts of a production. You could go to a bar, and then there was actually another upstairs more section, so I went up there, and I noticed that they'd removed a painting here of Frank Regali, who was a theatre personality. So it was one of these historic bits of the opera house's history historic history, but of the opera house story that they just have whitewashed out, airbrushed away. And that's the way back into the main auditorium. So they would extend it this way, I think, through there. And heading back down, and this is the lady who helped me, Pega Kalata, and she told me she was the grandchild of ANC leader, the Reverend James Kalata, sister of Fort Kalata, one of the Craddock Four murdered by the security police in 1985. Sadly, I believe she passed away not long ago. Very helpful and kind person. Yeah, so this is just one of the hidden real gems of PE that people don't really know about who don't live here. And I think they might have done some new restoration work recently. So this is the barn, which I mentioned earlier. Now, apparently the original theatre in Port Elizabeth, which was just down Whites Road from here, just above the main library, before the main library was built, it was known as the barn. And that was basically a fairly humble place for them to stage theatrical events. So they named this place the barn in memory of that. And I think that might have been the sign taken off the original barn. It was a wooden theatre called the barn. Yeah, that's the wooden sign. Can't really see it very well, but I actually wrote a satirical novella, called Azanian Apocalypse, which starts in this venue in the barn where there's a production put on by a satirist called, well, it's actually based on Peter Dirk Ace, and he's pulling the new South African local government and the whole ANC government apart, and then the security police storm the place. But that's not, I had to self-publish that, unfortunately, because you can't get a publisher for something that's so politically incorrect. So this was donated by the Hellenic community in '86 after it was reopened following refurbishing. So, the Greeks are famous for their role in the arts. Banister heading down, and the main entrance where Mrs. Kalata bade me farewell. And that's the doors from the foyer into the main auditorium. So this is where people would have assembled originally, just out in this small foyer here. And then looking back up Whites Road and down towards that original part of the Opera House. And the site for the extension. So at this point, I got in the car and drove about 2-3 k's to St. George's Park. And it was drizzling a bit, but let's see what we've got. So yeah, this was sad. This wooden building is a remaining block of the WAAF encampment set up in St. George's Park during World War II. According to Wikipedia, the site for this was for the 72nd Air School, a Second World War Women's Auxiliary Air Force Base basic training school. And there were dozens of these bungalows, I suppose they are, or small wooden, I know there's a word for it. It became a Sea Scouts training hall for a while, and that's why this boat is probably still there. But I think it was vacant by now and being invaded by vagrants. So this is actually a historic picture from 1942 during the Second World War, and I've used this in my book as well. Here you can see all of this WAAF buildings. So this was one huge military setup, and that little building I showed you previously was one of these here, probably that last one. It's right close to the Park Drive Road. I don't know how it survived, but somehow it did. But imagine the stories that could be told about this period. So there it is. As I say here in 2017, so I obviously made this PowerPoint after 2017 or in 2017. This thing had been demolished. It's very sad. Across the road from it was, or is, this settler cottage, which was being upgraded into Savage's restaurant. And further down the street, you'll see the entrance to what used to be one of the Park Drive mansions. But just the gate, ornate gate, has been retained, and the plot used for a block of flats. So yeah, we monitor this thing as we go. So this was called Matopa's. Look at all the security fencing that just ruins it. But that's all. So imagine if the gates were like this, imagine how nice the building itself might have been. You can get an idea of some of the kind of buildings, because there are a few left in Park Drive. And this is Shirley Cribb Nursing College, which has its own history. Originally built 1897, Art Nouveau style. Front section was added later. It became a hotel. The website says Sunbridge, built 1897 for his wife Emily Bourne Savage. Savage is a famous PE name. So it became the Park Hotel by adding a few large bedroom wing and a ballroom, being the nursing college since 1949. I'm just thinking, my mother trained to be a nurse, I think, in Port Elizabeth in the 1940s, probably just after the war. She was born in 26, so 36, 46, maybe not here, because it hadn't, only became a nursing college in 49. She might have been too old. So Shirley Cribb herself was remembered for outstanding services in the cause of nursing reform. It's interesting. It's a view down the front gate fence, as it were, wall. And in Whitehead Avenue, unfortunately silhouetted, is a beautiful house, the Aloes. Now, this is one of the dream houses, so-called, of Mill Park. Although it's not in Mill Park, but it's from that era of the early 20th century. Jones and McWilliams, who've designed so much of worth in PE, completed in 1911. And I've been inside this place. It's like majestic. I couldn't get in on this occasion, but later on I did. English arts and crafts style, according to Gavin McLaughlin's book, The Dream Houses of Mill Park. Back via Shirley Cribb. And there's that house again, the Aloes. With a great old fence and gate here. Then across the road from it is Union Cricket Ground. So this is, well, that's in St. George's Park. So there are 2 cricket fields in St. George's Park. Actually 3, because there's a second one next to the main stadium. So this thing also suffered during COVID. I mean, I don't know if they've restored it. It's a bit dark, but that's that Aloes building again. Shirley crib from across the road just to get a new view of it. And the Union Cricket Ground. And all around the park are these wild fig, magnificent trees. There's another ornate gate in front of a block of flats. And behind there is a Mill Park mansion, a Park Drive mansion, which I couldn't get to because it was an education department building now. And I wasn't allowed in, I don't think. So yeah, it says Department of Education, and awful ugly fencing all around it. And that's one of the entrances into St. George's Park, which has subsequently been totally surrounded with that same black steel fencing. This is a tree aloe. I'm walking past St. George's Hospital, which would be behind me as I walk here, and then into this, through this gate, but I'm going to leave it at this, and then we'll explore St. George's Park shortly.